the night I handed my mother the keys to tour my new house. She looked around the living room, ran her hand along the marble countertop I'd saved 3 years to afford, and said loud enough for every guest in the room to hear, "Your brother should have been the one to make it this far. He has the real talent. You just got lucky." The room went quiet. Someone's champagne glass clinked against a table. My aunt stopped mid-sentence. My coworker, standing by the fireplace, looked at the floor. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I set down my wine, smiled at my mother, and said, "You're right. Let him cover your mortgage next month, then." And then I walked away. My name is Nora, and if you've ever stood in the middle of something you built with your own 2 hands, while the people who were supposed to love you tried to burn it down, stay with me. Because what happened next changed everything. I had been paying my parents' mortgage for 4 years, not helping, not contributing, paying it. Every month, on the 15th, the full amount transferred directly from my account. They knew. They thanked me exactly once, back when I first started, and after that it simply became expected, a line item in their budget, something they counted on the way you count on the sun rising. Meanwhile, my brother had been figuring himself out since he was 22. That was the phrase my mother used. Figuring himself out. He moved in and out of their house 3 times in 5 years, borrowed money he never tracked and never repaid, and spent most of his time on a music project that had been 6 months from finished for the past 4 years. And every single time I came home for a holiday, my mother would find a way to work in something about how gifted he was, how sensitive, how the world just hadn't recognized him yet. I was a structural engineer. I had designed parts of 2 bridges and a hospital wing. I had worked 70-hour weeks through a pandemic while managing a long-distance relationship and quietly, carefully keeping my parents from losing the house they'd refinanced twice and couldn't afford on their own. But I was the lucky one. At my housewarming, my brother stood in the corner near the kitchen, barely speaking to anyone, nursing a drink he'd poured the moment he arrived. He hadn't congratulated me. He'd walked in, looked around, and said, "Nice place. The way you say it when you mean something else." After my mother's comment sliced through the room, I went to the back porch and stood in the cool air until Marcus found me. He stepped outside and closed the glass door behind him. He'd been my partner for 6 years. He knew the whole story. Every wire transfer. Every time I'd skipped a vacation to make sure their payment went through. Every phone call from my mother that started with, "We're in a bit of a situation." "You okay?" he asked. "I am," I said, and I meant it, though not the way he expected. "I'm done." He looked at me quietly for a moment. "Done how?" "Done paying for people who stand in my house and tell me I don't deserve it." He nodded slowly. He didn't try to talk me out of it. That was the thing about Marcus. He had watched me carry this for years without once asking me to put it down. But he had also never asked me to keep picking it up. The next morning, I canceled the automatic transfer. 4 years. 47 payments. Gone with a single confirmation click. Then I blocked the access I'd given my mother to the secondary account I'd set up specifically so she could check that the mortgage was covered. I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee going cold and felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could name. Still. Just still. My brother texted me first, which surprised me. It was 3 days later. The message said, "Hey, did something happen with the house payment? Mom's freaking out." I read it twice. Did something happen? I thought about the 4 years of monthly transfers. The time I wired them money the same week I was paying my own closing costs. The birthday I spent at my desk finishing a deadline so I could make sure there was enough in the account. Something happened. Yes, I happened. I finally stopped. I didn't reply. 2 days after that, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was 6 seconds long. "Nora, call your mother." That was it. No context. No acknowledgement. Just an instruction, like I was still 15 and had missed curfew. My mother called that same night. I watched her name light up the screen 4 times in a row, then let it go quiet. On day 8, she texted. The message was long. It covered several topics. The mortgage company had sent a notice. My brother wasn't in a position to help. She wasn't sure what she'd done to deserve this. She'd raised me better than this. She thought we were family. I read the whole thing standing in the parking garage at work. Then I put my phone in my bag and walked to my car. That weekend, Marcus and I drove 2 hours north to a cabin he'd rented for my birthday back in February, and we'd never gotten around to using. We sat on the dock in the evenings and didn't talk about my family until I brought it up on the second night, watching the water turn dark. She meant it, I said. She wasn't just saying it in the heat of the moment. She meant every word. Marcus was quiet. She has said versions of that my whole life, I continued. I just kept believing. If I gave more, eventually she'd see it. That she'd see me. He reached over and held my hand without saying anything, and that was the right thing to do. When we got back, there was a handwritten note in my mailbox. My mother's handwriting. She'd driven to my house and left it, rather than ringing the bell. The note said she was sorry if what she said hurt my feelings, that she hadn't meant it the way it sounded, and that she hoped we could talk. The phrase, "if what she said hurt my feelings," sat in my chest like a stone. I didn't respond. But I kept the note. I put it in a folder. That folder became something. I started printing things, quietly and methodically. 4 years of bank statements with the mortgage transfers highlighted. Screenshots of the original conversation where my mother had explained their financial situation and asked if I could step in for a little while. A calculation, one I'd never done out loud before, that added up to just over $63,000. I didn't send it anywhere. I just needed to see it. I needed the number to exist somewhere outside my own memory, where it had been living like a quiet hum I'd learned to ignore. 3 weeks after the housewarming, my brother showed up at my door. He looked like he hadn't slept well. He was in a jacket that needed cleaning, and he had the expression of someone who had rehearsed something on the drive over and wasn't sure he remembered it right. I opened the door and waited. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He came in and stood in the entryway, looking at the house the same way he had at the party, except this time, without the performance. He looked at the floor. "I didn't know it was this much," he said. "I didn't know you were paying the whole thing. What did you think was happening?" He exhaled. "I thought Dad had it handled. He told me he did. He said you helped out sometimes, but that he had it under control." I crossed my arms. "He told you that?" "Yeah." He looked up. "I found out last week. Mom showed me the statements trying to get me to understand why she was panicking. And I sat there looking at all those payments, and I didn't." He stopped. "I didn't know it was you. All of it. Every month. For 4 years." I said nothing. "I know that doesn't fix anything," he said. "I just wanted to say it in person." I watched him for a moment. My brother, whom my parents had protected from every hard thing his entire life, who had been handed excuses the way other people are handed responsibilities, who had not once, called to ask if I needed anything, if I was okay, if the weight I was carrying was too heavy. "Why do you think they never asked you to help?" I said. He looked surprised by the question. Then he looked ashamed. "Because they didn't think I could, or because they didn't think they needed to ask," I said. "Because they already had me." He sat down on the bench by the door without being invited to, and put his head in his hands. "I've been freeloading my whole life. Not just from them. From you too, even if I didn't know it. You not knowing it doesn't change what it cost me. I know. I'm not saying this to punish you," I said. "I'm saying it because you're sitting here and you asked to come in. That means something. But I need you to understand I didn't stop the payments because I wanted to hurt Mom and Dad. I stopped because I was standing in the house I built, and the woman who was supposed to be proud of me told me I didn't deserve to be there." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "She says things like that because she's scared of you." I stared at him, She doesn't know what to do with someone who just does things, who doesn't need her to hold your hand. She's always known how to mother someone who needed saving. You never needed saving, so she just kind of picked the person who did, I finished. He nodded slowly. And that was me. And I let it happen. I let them make me the favorite by staying small. He looked at me. That wasn't fair to you. Something in the room shifted. Not forgiveness, it was too early for that. And too complicated. But something real. Like the first breath after a long hold. I made coffee. We sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours and talked. Not the way we had at family dinners with performance built into every sentence, but like two people who shared a history that neither of us had fully understood until recently. He told me things I hadn't known, how our father had taken out a personal loan twice without telling our mother, how the refinancing had been his idea, how the situation I'd been helping with was partly built on decisions they'd made and hidden from everyone. I told him the number, 63,000. He went pale. I'm not asking you to repay it, I said. I'm telling you because you came here and asked to understand. He nodded. He didn't try to fix it or minimize it. He just let it sit there between us. When he left, he said, I'm going to find a job. A real one. I've been hiding behind the music thing because it was the one place they couldn't criticize me. But it's not going anywhere, and I think I've known that for 2 years. I walked him to the door. That's your decision to make, not mine. I know, but I wanted to tell you. After he left, I stood in the kitchen for a long time. The house was quiet in that particular way it gets on a Sunday afternoon, full of light from the west windows, warm without being loud. Marcus was out getting groceries. I was alone with $63,000 in 4 years and one brother who might actually be trying to become someone different. My father called that night. Not my mother. My father. Which was its own kind of signal. He said my name when I answered. Then he said, I know you're not going to make this easy, and I'm not going to pretend you should. I waited. Your mother is not handling this well. I'm not saying that to make you feel responsible. I'm saying it because I'm scared, and I don't know what to do. And I've spent 60 years not asking for help, and I don't know how to start. That was, in its way, the most I had ever heard my father say. She embarrassed me in front of my guests, I said. In my home, on the first night I'd ever hosted anything. I know. That wasn't the first time, Dad. That was just the first time she did it in public. He was quiet. I could hear him breathing. I spent 4 years making sure you kept that house, I said. And she stood in mine and told me I didn't deserve the one I earned. I know, he said again. His voice was different from how it usually was. The competence was gone, the authority. He just sounded old. I know, Nora, and I knew it when it happened, and I didn't say anything, and I have to live with that. I hadn't expected that. I sat with it. I'm not calling to ask for money, he said. I want you to know that. We're going to figure it out. We're talking to a financial advisor. We might have to sell the house and downsize. That's where we are. But I'm not calling about that. Then what are you calling about? He exhaled slowly. I'm calling because your brother came home and sat across the kitchen table and told your mother and me what you told him. The number. All of it. And your mother hasn't stopped crying in 2 days. Not because she's scared. Because she finally understood. A long pause. She didn't know the full amount, Nora. She knew you were helping. She didn't know it was everything. I leaned against the counter. She knew enough to keep accepting it. You're right. She did. And I did. We're not going to pretend we didn't. Good, I said quietly. I want to say I'm sorry, he said. Not the way your mother says it in a letter where she still finds a way to make it about herself. I want to say it plainly. What we asked of you, what we let continue, it wasn't right. We treated you like a resource. And what your mother said at your house, that was cruel. She was wrong. You have never once not deserved what you worked for. I sat down at the kitchen table. The thing about an apology from someone who has never given one before is that it doesn't arrive the way you expect. You think you'll feel victorious, or relieved, or like something finally closes. Instead, I just felt tired and sad and strangely tender toward a version of my parents that had never quite existed. I don't know what comes next, I said. Neither do I, he said. But I think whatever it is, it has to start with honesty. Which means I owe you more than an apology. I owe you the truth about why we were in that situation to begin with, and I'd like to tell you, not tonight. But when you're ready, I'll think about it, I said. That's all I'm asking. We said goodnight carefully, like two people navigating a floor that might still have weak spots. When I hung up, Marcus was standing in the doorway with 2 bags of groceries and an expression that asked everything without saying a word. My father apologized, I said. He set the bags down. A real one? I think so. He crossed the kitchen and hugged me without speaking. And I stood in the middle of my house, in the middle of my life, and let myself feel the full weight of what 4 years had actually cost. Not just the money. The hours I had given to worry instead of peace. The versions of myself I had withheld in order to appear fine, capable, unfazed. The celebrations I had half attended, while a part of my mind was running numbers. I let myself feel it all. And then I let myself put it down. My mother came to see me 6 weeks later. Not with my father. Alone. She rang the bell at 10 in the morning on a Saturday. And when I opened the door, she looked like herself, but quieter. The performance was gone. She wasn't wearing the version of herself she wore for other people. She asked if she could come in. I said yes. We sat in the living room, the one she'd stood in at the party, and made her announcement. And she didn't try to start with anything light. She said, I have been thinking about what I said every single day since I said it. I waited. I have always found it easier to love your brother, she said. Not because I love you less, but because he needed me in ways I understood. And you were always so far ahead of anything I knew how to give. I didn't know how to be the mother of someone like you, so I kept finding ways to make myself matter. She looked at her hands. That night, I was standing in your house, this beautiful house you built, and I felt so small. And instead of saying that, I said something terrible. I was quiet for a moment. You've said versions of it my whole life, I said. That was just the version I happened to be ready to hear. She looked at me, and her eyes were full. I know. And I am so sorry, Nora. Not sorry if it hurt. Sorry. Because it was wrong. And because I have been wrong about this for a very long time. I'd rehearsed a lot of things I might say in this moment. Hard things. Clear things. Things that would draw the line precisely where it needed to be. But sitting across from my mother without her armor on, I just said, I believe you. It wasn't forgiveness. Not entirely. But it was an opening. And I decided I could live with openings. They did sell the house. My parents moved into a smaller place 40 minutes out of the city. And my father started paying off the debt himself. Slowly, in the way people do when they've run out of someone else's resources and have to use their own. My brother took a job at a logistics company. Nothing glamorous, but steady. He called me on my birthday for the first time in years, and we talked for an hour about nothing important and everything that mattered. He paid back $7,000 over 18 months. I told him twice that he didn't have to. He said, I know. That's why I want to. I threw another party in the spring. Different guest list, same house. I put flowers on the dining table and opened the windows and played music that didn't ask anything from anyone. My brother came. Marcus's family came. Friends who had watched me hold myself together through years I didn't fully talk about, they came. My mother came too. She stood in the living room in the same spot she'd stood before. And this time she put her hand on my arm and said, I'm proud of you. Quietly, not for anyone else. I nodded. I didn't rush to fill the space with anything. Some things don't need a response. They just need to be received. Later that night, standing on the back porch while the party carried on inside, Marcus handed me a glass and stood beside me, and said nothing for a while. The sky was doing something soft and indigo at the edges. The neighborhood was calm. "You think it's fixed?" he asked eventually. "No," I said. "I think it's honest now. That's different." He nodded. "Better, though. Much better. Because here's what I know now that I didn't know 4 years ago, or 12 years ago, or whenever it was that I first started reaching into my own reserves to fill someone else's empty spaces. Love that only flows in one direction is not love. It's a transaction with an unofficial contract, and the terms are always written by the person collecting. The moment you stop paying, the contract breaks. And in that breaking, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the people on the other side finally have to look at what they've been holding. My parents looked. It took losing the safety net I'd become for them to stand on their own and realize they were capable of standing. My brother looked. It took someone laying out the numbers plainly on a kitchen table for him to understand what he'd been willing to ignore. And I looked too. At myself. At the version of me that had kept writing checks hoping one day the account would pay out in belonging. That version of me was smart and strong and completely wrong about what she was owed and how to get it. I don't carry it anymore. Not the resentment, not the $63,000, not the need for her to finally stand in my house and say the right thing. I carried it long enough to understand every corner of it, and then I set it down in my own kitchen, in my own home, the one I earned, the one nobody gave me, the one that was never luck. They tried to make me smaller so they could feel bigger. It didn't work. Not because I was too proud to shrink, but because somewhere in all those years of carrying, I had quietly become someone who didn't fit small spaces anymore. I didn't get here because they believed in me. I got here in spite of the fact that they didn't. And there is something clarifying about that, something almost clean. The porch light was warm. Inside, I could hear laughter. Marcus was telling some long story that had gotten out of hand in the best way. And everyone was leaning in. My brother was laughing at something my aunt said. My mother was in the kitchen helping with dishes she hadn't been asked to touch, quietly, without announcement. I stood outside for one more minute and let it all settle. Then I went back in.